Hello, we'll be looking at To the Nile by John Keats today. Son of the old mountain African, chief of the pyramid and crocodiles, we call thee fruitful, and that very while a desert fills our seeing's inward span. Nurse of swart nations since the world began, art thou so fruitful? Or dost thou beguile such men to honour thee, who worn with toil rest for a space twixt Cairo and Deccan? Oh, may dark fancies err, they surely do. It's ignorance that makes a barren waste of all beyond itself. Thou dost bedew green rushes like our rivers, and dost taste the pleasant sunrise. Green isles hast thou too, and to the sea as happily dost haste. To the Nile is a Petrarchan sonnet composed by the late Romantic poet John Keats. Keats said to have composed this sonnet in a friendly competition with his fellow Romantics, Leigh Hunt and P.B. Shelley. A Petrarchan sonnet has an octave rhyming A, B, B, A, A, B, B, A, and a sestet rhyming C, D, C, D, C, D. The volta, or the turning of the line of thoughts, occurs from the octave to the sestet. In this sonnet also, line number 9 marks a change of thought. Initially, the poetic persona thinks of the Nile as a holy or mysterious river that beguiled the travelers. But from line 9 onwards, he begins to think of it as an ordinary river similar to the ones he sees in his own country. In Greek mythology, Nilus is considered the god of the Nile River. The poem traces the course of the Nile from the legendary sub-Saharan Moon Mountains to the Mediterranean Sea, and how it turned some parts of Egypt into fertile oases within a desert. The poem is written in the second person. The poetic persona addresses a personified Nile directly as a sentient being. In the octave, the poet acknowledges the ancient fame of and the reverence paid to the river and calls it son of the old mountains African. The poetic technique used here are inversion and personification. In addition to this, this is also an invocation to a supernatural power in the form of the Nile. Then, in the second line, the Nile is invoked as the chief of the pyramid and crocodile. The block of limestone and marble that were used to build the great pyramids in Egypt, said to have been transported from their quarries to the present site using the Nile. And the pyramid and the civilization that built them are located close to the river. Hence, it is a chief of the pyramid. On the bank of the Nile, one finds huge crocodiles. In addition, ancient Egyptians worshipped a crocodile-headed god who was related to the mummification process and death in general. The pyramids are thought to be the tombs of ancient Egyptian pharaohs. Hence, the Nile is chief of crocodile. At a surface level, the poet creates bathos through the phrase, I quote, chief of the pyramid and crocodile, end quote, by juxtaposing the pyramids with crocodiles. The son, the chief, the nurse are references to the different roles of the Nile. The Nile is both a man and a woman, therefore androgynous. The octave contains a series of contradictions. An old mountain dedicated to a virgin goddess had given birth to a son. The Nile is a chief of both the pyramids and crocodiles. It is also a river in the middle of a desert. In the third and fourth lines, the poet refers to the first contradiction. I quote, we call thee fruitful, and that very while a desert fills our seeing's inward span, end quote. The fruitfulness and barrenness, two extremes, exist side by side as the Nile flows through the vast desert. Once a year, the Nile floods, depositing rich loamy mud on the banks of the river, making it ideal for agriculture. Today, this has changed with the construction of many dams along the river. The Egyptian god Hapi is associated with flooding of the river, thus bringing fertility and fruitfulness to the area. According to Egyptian mythology, the Nile itself is considered a symbol of fertility. When the Egyptian god Orisis was killed and his body parts were scattered by his brother Seth, his genitals were supposed to have been thrown into the river to be eaten by a crocodile so that his wife would not be able to resurrect him. In the next line, the river is invoked as a nurse of the Africans, another image of fertility. Yet the poet immediately questions the truth value of his own invocation with the question, art thou so fruitful? The first question is followed by another rhetorical question. I quote, O dost thou beguile such men to honor thee, who worn with toil rest for a space twixt Cairo and Deccan, end quote. Here the poet is questioning the famed fruitfulness or the nurturing qualities of the river. He is wondering whether people have called the river fruitful only in comparison to what lay on either side of it, and because it offered, I quote, rest for a space twixt Cairo and Deccan, end quote. He's asking whether the river had fooled the various nations of people who traveled betwixt Cairo and Deccan, probably the travelers of the ancient Silk Route, into worshipping it by assuming a mysterious supernatural appearance. At this point, it is possible that Keats may be referring to the numerous ancient temples dedicated to Orisis along the river, which were worshipped by travelers too. The poetic persona begins the sestet with a prayer or deeply felt wish to the Nile and, O gods of Egypt, to make his dark thoughts and doubts about the fruitfulness of the Nile's false. He says, I quote, O may dark fancies err, end quote. Then he affirms with certainty that his fancies were indeed wrong with the short phrase, I quote, they surely do, end quote. Here, Keats is critical of his imagination or negative capability, as he called it. Negative capability, according to Keats, is when man is capable of being in uncertainties, mysterious doubts. Let me say that again. When man is capable of being in uncertainties, mysteries, doubts, without any irritable reaching out after facts and reason. Keats says that, I quote, it's ignorance that makes a barren waste of all beyond itself, end quote. Here, Keats might be talking about our ignorance about the Nile or things and people in general. Ignorant people assume everything beyond what is familiar to be barren waste. In the same way, the Egyptians of Europeans of Keats's generation had either romanticized or demonized the rest of the world. Keats tried to see a similarity between the rivers of England and the Nile. In sociology, this kind of thinking is called cultural relativism. But this attempt to positively evaluate the Nile in comparison to English rivers too smacks of European superiority complex, as the Nile, as the longest river of the world, is far longer to rivers like the Avon, one of the longest river in England. In the same way, if one is to compare the European and African civilizations from a cultural relativist point of view, then one might be doing injustice to something that is far older. In the last four lines, the poet looks at the river from a from an aesthetic point of view and describes its journey to the sea using typically sensuous Keatsian language. In conclusion, Keats seemed to suggest that whatever or wherever we are, in the end, everything has the same end. In this poem, Keats uses inversion when he says son of the old mountain African to draw attention to the term sun. He personifies the Nile by calling it son of the moon mountain African. And he uses superfluous bathos when he calls the river chief of the pyramid and crocodile by juxtaposing pyramid with crocodile. He uses invocation thrice. First, he calls the river son of the old mountain African, then chief of the pyramid and crocodile, then lastly, nurse of SWAT nations since the world began. He asked two rhetorical questions. The first, nurse of SWAT nations since the world began, art thou so fruitful? Second, O dost thou beguile such men to honor thee, who, worn with toil, rest for a space twixt Cairo and Deccan? Also, he uses a mixture of end-stop lines and run-on lines or enjambment. As the seventh technique, he uses contractions in order to maintain the internal rhythm in words like twixt and then he uses exclamation to show extreme emotions, as in, oh, may dark fancies err. Then he uses dichotomy. He creates dichotomy between you versus I, fertile versus barren, green versus sandy. Lastly, he uses honorific pronouns to refer to the river, such as thee and thou. So what makes this poem a romantic poem? Here the poet shows interest in the lyric and the personal, interest in the transcendent, that which is beyond human understanding, interest in the transcendent as it relates to nature, interest in a glorified, romanticized past, both the medieval and the classical, interest in the role of the poet as well as in the creation of his art, interest in the imagination, which intuitively connects with nature and the transcendent and develops over time. For today, that would be it, the discussion. I would like to leave you with these questions. The first, what are the three epithets the poet uses to describe the Nile? Second, what is the contradiction presented in the line, in the third and the fourth lines? In lines 6 to 8, the poet presents another contradiction. What is that? The poet gives three reasons in defense of the presentation of the Nile as an ordinary river. Quote that section. In To the Nile, Keats rejects European practice of cultural imperialism only to fall victim to cultural relativism. Do you agree? Discuss. To the Nile deals with two European worldviews. Keats rejects one only to embrace the other. Do you agree? Comment. To the Nile is an example of European view of everything non-European. Discuss. Comment on To the Nile as a statement on everything that is alien and exotic from the point of view of a European. With that, I will end today's discussion. Let's meet with another discussion like this in another video. Goodbye.